My name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and this is the lecture on a topic, rare variations of Sicilian. And variation we're going to be analyzing now and talking about is Smith-Morra Gambit. Smith-Morra Gambit is on the list of the gambits that there are a lot of unsound gambits in the chess theory. Smith-Morra Gambit is definitely not on that list. It does not guarantee the advantage, but white always has sufficient compensation. Maybe it's enough for equality, maybe it's enough for double-edged game, maybe it's enough for having little advantage, but it's definitely worth considering. And it's not opening for black to take lightly. Of course, in this position, black has an option of going d3, but then white just simply takes, and we don't want to discuss this position. It's a type of position close to the hedgehog variation or some Poles and Sicilians. It's a very playable position, but we are talking about Smith-Morra Gambit. d5 is not an option because after e takes d, and black has to take on d5 and cd, we get to c3 variation that is very favorable for white. Look at my lecture on c3 variation that I already recorded, and I explained this position. So let's talk about accepted Smith-Morra Gambit. Here is the position. This gambit has been played, I don't know for how many, 40, 50 years, maybe longer. No opening can last that long unless it's credible. This is very credible. I recommend you play it for both sides. So after knight takes c3, well, most common continuation is when black plays knight c6, then d6, e6, and knight f6. However, black came up with several interesting ideas in the early stage of the game, and I was pursuing one myself. One of them was, for example, going e6, knight f3, d6, and I'll show you a very interesting idea. Knight c6, castling a6, queen e2, that's what white's plan is, and going rook d1. And variation b5 had a lot of followers, and after bishop b3, rook a7. Now black is trying to play rook d7 and bishop b7. For example, on rook d1, rook d7, and in a lot of cases, if they play bishop e7 and knight f6, they get much better position than they can get otherwise against Smith-Morra Gambit. However, I gave up on this continuation because it's extremely dangerous. There are several tries for white. Now, we cannot completely cover what is going to happen if white plays rook a7 and rook d7. There are a lot of games online in a database. You can do some little research, and you will see that after rook a7, rook d1, and rook d7, there is a sacrifice that will give white very strong initiative. There is also potential of sacrifice after rook d7, knight g5, and sacrifice on e6. They are all very dangerous. I cannot tell you which one is the best way to play for white. If you do 10-15 minute research on the latest results on it, you will come to proper conclusion. However, I want to show you some interesting game that happened not too long ago between Mark Esserman, our national master, and quite famous grandmaster Luke Van Wely, where white won a very decisive game. Before I show you this game, I was told by one grandmaster local that look at this game, that he sacrificed a piece. It was so unusual that before we discuss that, I want to show you something interesting. This is not Smith-Morra and has nothing to do with Smith-Morra, but there is a reason why I am showing you that. This is Paulson system, and I analyzed it online on chess.com. G3, bishop b7, bishop g2, knight f6, castle, queen c7, and now we play rook e1 and b4. Now this position was analyzed by me, knight d5. Actually, black can play b4 even earlier. It doesn't change anything. Knight d5, ed, ed. I believe this is piece sacrifice that was analyzed carefully. I analyzed one of my games against Caruana, quite famous former American Italian grandmaster. I proved that this position is very powerful for white. So this kind of a piece sacrifice is a long-term sacrifice and very, very powerful attack. Now, we're not going to go through this because that's not our topic. And now you will see why I brought this position up. Because the game I'm going to show you, e4, that's the game between Mark Esserman and Van Wely. cd, c3, dc, knight takes c3, knight c6. Now black plays it unorthodox way. Knight f3, e6, bishop c4, a6, castle, and knight g e7. I'm very skeptical of these moves. It's kind of delaying development. Bishop g5, f6 to untie the knight. Bishop e3, knight g6, bishop b3, and b5. Black wants to play bishop b7. And here, knight d5. As soon as I saw this move, it immediately rang the bell. So white has to have very, very strong initiative here. E takes d, e takes d. But I didn't know that is lost position for black almost by force. This is absolutely terrible for black, because white here has a lot more compensation than in example I showed you just before that in Paulson variation. Here white has a lot more development, more dangerous pieces, and that's why I believe this position is hopelessly lost for black. Knight e5, d6. It was very powerful game. Almost nothing can be done for black. Queen d5 is very strong potential threat. Bishop b7. Knight takes e5, f takes e. There is pawn on d6. It's like a bone in your throat that won't let you develop, won't let you live. And after f takes e, f4, very powerful move. Queen f6, fe, queen takes e5, and this was all analyzed. I know that. I didn't speak to Esserman, and I didn't talk to anyone about it, but moves that played by white are not easy to find on the over the board. There are a lot of good continuations for white, but next move is total killer. Is bishop g5. And the game is practically over. King is stuck in the center, rook e1 is threatening, and at the same time bishop is untouchable because white can play queen e1 check, and you see black has to play bishop e7. King d8 will lead to immediate mate on king c8, queen c7, and bishop f7 on king e8. It's an immediate mate, so bishop e7 has to be played, and now either bishop f7 check, and on king d8, queen a5, black loses everything. And after that, I think they get mated. King f8, bishop takes g6. This is a mate, and queen e7 check, followed by bishop f7 or queen f7. Very, very powerful. And after bishop g5, in this position, after bishop g5, black is completely helpless. Bishop e7, bishop f7 check, king d8, d takes e, knight takes e7. Just look at this position. Material is even. Okay, black has extra pawn, but I don't think if they had extra rook, that would have been good enough for them. And we don't need to go to the end of this game. Game ended. It's very, very dangerous for black to play this way. So therefore, I would recommend, and I think the best thing can happen, a correct way to play, a4 c5, d4 cd c3. I will be talking about g6 continuation. g6 is universal. You can play against Smith-Morra Gambit and also against c3 Sicilian. But if you are already in Smith-Morra Gambit, I would recommend to play variation that is a lot more safe. e6 castle, bishop e7. Well, bishop e7 a little more accurate move order than knight f6 to stop bishop g5 in some cases. Queen e2, knight f6, and now when white plays rook d1, you should stop white from playing e5 by playing e5 yourself. After e5, white has few different ways they can play. They can go h3 or bishop g5. I think it's transposing. Well, it has similar idea. Bishop g5, castle, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6. White has unlimited control on d5 square, that they're down a pawn, and at the same time, black is going to have knight d4. Position is approximately equal. Also, what black wants to do, black wants to play bishop g4 to get the access on d4 square. h3, that would be normal here. Black would castle, and now white has to make an attempt of starting some activity here. Otherwise, they are down at central pawn, and they have some ways. I have seen games with bishop e3 where white has on a borderline enough or just enough compensation for extra pawn, or an attempt of starting very active play, such as b4. So b4 is a very interesting attempt, and let me show you how interesting it is. After b4, the best way to play for black is a6. Not knight takes b4, knight takes c5, but a6. And now if white goes a4, now you play knight takes b4. The reason why we needed a6 and a4, first of all, in number of cases you want to stop knight b5. And secondly, because on bishop a3, you want to go a5 and support that knight. Possibility for white is knight takes e5, and that leads to some very interesting position. After knight takes e5, what can happen? Queen c7, attacking the knight on e5, and retreating knight on f3 is not going to be good for white. But white has very interesting attempt of knight f7. I analyzed this position, and I don't know whether I want to play it for black or not. I'm not saying black is not doing well. This is very interesting, something you should consider playing. Rook takes f7, bishop f4, bishop f8, it's the best move. Now, I cannot go through all different variations. This was all carefully, very carefully analyzed with the help of multiple different engines. And bishop f8, rook a to b1, knight c6, bishop takes f7, queen takes f7, bishop takes d6, bishop takes d6, rook takes d6. And look at this position. Now white has only rook and a pawn for bishop and the knight. Normally it's not enough. Black still has to solve the problem of their development. And that's not an easy task. On bishop e6, for example, there is a very tricky move, queen b2. This variation was not given anywhere, attacking b7 pawn, which, believe it or not, is not easy to defend. There is no rook b8 because rook takes c6. You don't want to go bishop c8 because you just developed that bishop. So the best move is rook a7. Well, you also don't want to go knight d8, where white simply goes rook d1. And although they have only rook for knight and bishop, they have absolutely dominating piece placement. And not to mention here queen b6, attacking knight on d8, bishop on e6, maybe lose later. This is very playable position after rook a7. This is something for you to analyze and play. I don't know 100% safe system for black to play. Well, this may be safe if you refine somehow and if you decide for black that you don't want an advantage, you may find an equality somewhere along the way. But this is something you should definitely consider playing for white. There are a lot of different ways to play against Smith-Morra, and you can pick up from different books, different suggestions, everything. I am trying to give you here something that may not have been analyzed before. Now, I want to show you one interesting game that I've seen online played. e4, c5, just possible dangers. Actually, not knight f3, of course, d4, cd, c3, dc, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, e6, bishop c4. Sometimes black plays knight e7. They trying to play knight g6. Well, for example, if white castle, they want to play knight g6. And then when they play d6, white cannot develop bishop on f4. Well, what I would recommend in this case, it's very interesting move. Bishop g5 is pinning the knight, and some natural move like h6 can sparkle immediate disaster, like knight b5. This maybe over real quick, there is a possibility there may be d5, but then ed and d takes c, very strong for white, and threatening knight d6 mate. And on queen a5, we have bishop d2. That's not acceptable. So black has to go here f6. Well, then on knight b5, they're going to have knight g6. But then you simply retreat your bishop to e3, and f6 is not really appealing move because it weakens e6 pawn if black wants to go d6 later. So this is something interesting to consider. So white practically forces black to finish development quick. So I don't know of any acceptable variation for black to play besides quick castling. And here they have to go e5. So this position may be analyzed, and you can narrow search right here to this position. And this position is, I'm convinced it's double-edged. It can be played for both sides. Thank you very much, and I will see you real soon.